Joining us now is MS Now White House reporter Laura Barron Lopez, MS Now senior Washington reporter and co-host of The Weekend here on MS Now, Eugene Daniels, and senior writer at The Dispatch and MS Now contributor David Drucker. Thank you so much for being here with us, everyone. So, Laura, let's start with you and more on Jack Smith in a moment. But the Freedom 250 account on X just posted this. Due to the heat and in coordination with public safety officials, the Great American State Fair will be temporarily closed until 5 p.m. today. So you have some new reporting on some of the concerns beyond the heat, though, and you've also been talking to visitors. What are they saying out there?
That's right. So beyond the heat, which is obviously a big concern, especially because the heat mixed with the fireworks can cause a lot of air pollution and problems for people with asthma and the elderly. And a doctor told us that this could be a disaster, essentially, because of that. But beyond that, the production company that is putting this on is Event Strategies, Inc. They have a lot of ties to the president. They worked on that January 6th Ellipse rally for the president. They also have been a part of a number of other events that the president has put on throughout both of his terms, and they are in charge of this one. And what sources told us was that sources involved with the planning of this event, when it comes to security, that Event Strategies, Inc. may have a lot of extensive experience with rallies and political rallies that the president has put on, but not so much with events that could be as big in scope as this one, because traditionally this event is much larger than the president's political rallies. This July 4th event, where people often travel from out of town and from states across the country. Now, when it comes to visitors here so far, I was at that American State Fair just this week, and it has had issues throughout the week with having to shut down for a few hours at a time because of the heat. But a lot of the people there are supporters of President Trump, including ones from states across the country. And I spoke to some about how they think he's done so far on the job. Take a listen. Do you guys mind telling me who you supported in the last election?
I voted for President Trump.
Trump.
And what do you think about how he's doing so far?
He's not perfect. I like a lot of it. Some I don't like. But I can say that for any president in the last 20 years, is there's things some of them did that I like, some that I didn't care for.
I agree with what he just said. I mean,
what he promised that he was going to fix the economy, bring prices down. Do you think he's done that?
We're not feeling that yet. No.
And that's a sentiment that I heard from a number of people that I spoke to at the fair who still support the president, despite the fact that they feel as though he hasn't taken any direct action on the economy or issues that help themselves. And it's just a striking point, considering that the president, again, on this July 4th, is very much making this about himself, calling it a Trump rally. And the source close to the White House that I spoke to said that that can come with risks, because not everything has to be a Trump rally. Sometimes it can be a USA rally, they said. And when you make it all about the president, that may mean lower crowd sizes, especially in a Democratic-leaning city.
And it'll be interesting to see how many people show up for this perceived Trump rally before the fireworks tomorrow. Eugene, I want to follow up with you on this topic and sort of get a vibe check as a person that lives and works in D.C. What are you hearing and seeing out there?
Not a lot of excitement. I mean, D.C. is not exactly a bastion of MAGA hopefuls and excited people who love Donald Trump to begin with. But then this July 4th, these holidays in this city people are very patriotic here. The partisanship of it has confused people. I was just literally yesterday buying snacks for my little dog, and I could hear some workers talking to people that were shopping as well. And what everyone was talking about was, one, it's going to be too hot to go out there. I don't want to sit through a long Trump speech. I can just watch that at home, and it's probably going to be the same thing that we've heard before. And most importantly, that they felt like 250 years of this country should be something that brought everybody in, and they frankly didn't feel welcome. And so that's the kind of vibe here in Washington, D.C. Outside of the heat, where it's very hot, there's been for days the jets practicing overhead, which has been very annoying, I think, for a lot of people that live in Washington, D.C. I think people were excited. Just a couple of years ago, I remember talking to folks as, folks were thinking about 250 years of this country and July 4th, and they were more excited about it. The idea that this country, came and was a stubborn realization for the folks who were flawed, though they were, who created this country, and the folks that continue to push for it. And now all of that has kind of left it because it is a Donald Trump rally. He wanted to take it over. So as Laura was saying, you kind of, you break it, you bought it. So now it's a Trump rally. So whether it's a success or not depends largely on Donald Trump and the folks that he's employed.
And David, I just want you to add to that. Do you think he's going to like how this rally, how the fireworks, how the state fair is going thus far, or is this a big flop? As I reported earlier, he's an optics guy, right?
Yeah, he is, and I'm sure that he'll ignore the optics of what we're actually seeing and tell us that it looks like exactly the way he wants everybody to think it looks. Eugene brings up a couple of really good points. So does Laura. For people who live and work in D.C., we're just, believe it or not, we're kind of just like everybody else. We lament the traffic. Oh, there's a protest is shutting down some main thoroughfare. So for some of us, we've looked at these celebrations. On the one hand, as it's really great that the country wants to celebrate the 250th anniversary. On the other hand, we live here, we work here. Do we want to get caught in all the traffic snarls and listen to the jets flying overhead? I think that's great for people that travel from out of town. For us, it's just another day of the week, not the celebration or July 4th itself, but just having to deal with it. I would say that this would have been so much better had the administration allowed Congress to handle this the way it does inaugurations. Every 4 years, there's an inauguration, and it's handled by a bipartisan committee in Congress, and they plan both the swearing in and some of the events afterwards, regardless of which party wins the White House that year. And it allows, Americans of all stripes to feel a part of it. And even if you don't like who won the election, you don't feel particularly excluded. And once this thing became branded as a Trump-organized event, forget the speech for a minute, it just became branded as a Trump-organized event. It just created a lot of confusion, and it created a lot of disappointment. And also, look, there are probably people, artists in particular, who didn't want to perform that are not political at all. But all of a sudden they're getting asked, how do you feel about performing at the Trump event? And for all we know, they don't really care, Trump, Biden, Bush, Obama, but they didn't want to get politically branded. So people start pulling out. We saw a lot of this happen at the Kennedy Center when Trump, briefly tried to rename it with him. People started pulling out of performing at the Kennedy Center, even if they didn't really care who the president was. They just didn't want to be involved in politics. So this could have gone a whole lot smoother if the president hadn't demanded to own the thing, but he did, and so here we are.